the reason that, like, I realized something was kind of off was that I got rid of, I went to the full end of the other scale of, like, I was eating bad foods and I wasn't taking care of myself, to I was eating all organic and I didn't have any chemicals in anything that I had. And I wasn't drinking, and I wasn't drinking coffee, and I thought, isn't all of this supposed to, and it did make my anxiety 10 times better. In my body felt great, but my mind was not, in fact, my mind felt more foreign to me than ever, because I had my coping mechanism of alcohol in the evening, and I had my stimulant in the morning of caffeine. And though, of course, neither of those are great coping mechanisms for ADHD, it was getting me through in a familiarity that I was, like, normalized with.
Because the caffeine, like, not necessarily caffeine, but it does regulate you because it's a stimulant, but also it triggers your, the start of your day. And then you were using alcohol as the trigger for the end of your day.
Right.
So, like, those were just keeping your body regulated in a way.
Yeah, and it was like, and alcohol was like a dopamine flush. Like, you know, you get flooded, and then it dumps it, which is why you feel
especially
awful after drinking, especially for people with ADHD.
Fun fact, alcohol does not bring dopamine to everyone. It is correlated with people who have alcoholism in their family.
Well, that tracks.
Same.
So
no, I'm the same. Like, not everybody feels like happiness from alcohol. It is very highly correlated. And if I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong, but I did read, like, an actual article on this and how it's correlated to like a history of alcoholism in your family.
Yes, which I do.
Me
so
too.
that makes a lot of sense, and I definitely want to get. I know we're going to have an episode on that. At some point, so we will get into that, and probably correlations of, like, ADHD with alcoholism and etc.
Addiction and ADHD are definitely linked, and we will get more into that.
Yes, we will. So that's how I ended up finding out. And the first person that diagnosed me was a psychiatrist who didn't even tell me I had ADHD. She just said, "I'm going to prescribe you Strattera." And I said, "What is Strattera? Why are you prescribing me this?" And she said, "Well, you seem to be presenting inattentive ADHD." And I was like, I feel like we could have led with that.
Yeah, you don't just tell me,
and
I'm going to give you this drug. Bitch, why?
And there was only, like, it was like the DSM-5 questions, and I don't know exactly how psychiatry works and when and how they're able to diagnose, but it was like, well, this feels like a very loose diagnosis. Let me give a second opinion. And then there did seem to be a lot of different, like, red tape of how to get a diagnosis, and it was confusing per state I was in, and insurance, and it just felt, like, very confusing up until the point where, like, I just accepted the fact that I did have 2 different psychiatrists that did say, you have ADHD, and they did prescribe me medication. So I was like, that feels like the validation I need to, like, be secure in that. And the only thing that I guess could technically confirm it on a scientific level was if I were to go get a neuropsych evaluation where they hook you up to a machine and literally watch your brain. Which is interesting. It costs, for whatever reason, us thousands of dollars to do it, but we'll literally see the individual neurochemistry of our brain and how it functions so that we get better customized care towards our brain. And it also gives the universities a shit ton of very important information about our brains. So I'm like, it sounds like something you should be paying for, and then I am, like, a test subject.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm like, listen, I know I have ADHD. Like, we don't have to confirm that via neuropsych evaluation.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but that was where I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to pay thousands of dollars just to feel validate. Like, I need to work on that of, like, and that's part of, like, imposter syndrome and different things like that.
I can understand that from a chronic illness, girly.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that's my experience with it. I do present combined type, and then the last thing on that is, like, at the end of the DSM-5, it mentions remission, which I thought was interesting, because you touched on that of, like...
So let me read it for you.
Yeah,
it does say partial remission, I think.
And remission does represent, like, a dormancy. It's not, remission isn't a cure. It is to say that those traits are no longer active, that they are dormant.
Yes. So that terminology, right? So it says impartial remission. When full criteria were previously met, fewer than full criteria have been met for the past 6 months, and the symptoms still result in impairment in social, academic, and occupational functioning. So it's saying that like less of your symptoms are presented. But like what you have mentioned, right, is that those symptoms are still there. We have coping mechanisms to address them. So I don't know, and I actually have a really good friend that works in social work, and she was mentioning like healing from trauma and healing from things like ADHD. And I personally, I don't know how I feel about that. I'd have to do a lot more reading into it, but I think that maybe like there's certain things that present similarly to ADHD, right? Like complex post-traumatic stress disorder presents as in fight or flight. Those symptoms and presentations of complex post-traumatic stress disorders tend to mimic or look a lot like ADHD. I see that a lot. I have, as a special education coordinator and a child find, so I've looked at all those things, and I often talk about it, and I say if I were to give an ADHD checklist to all the kids at my school, most of them would probably qualify for ADHD eligibility. Does that mean they have ADHD? No. A lot of my kids have very unstable home lives, and that in turn puts them in flight or flight, which presents similarly to ADHD. And that, if you heal yourself and your body to not be in fight or flight, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But when it is a chemical imbalance and it is an actual issue going on with your brain, that doesn't make sense to me, especially because I personally have done a lot of work on my own personal trauma. I have done a lot of work, and I understand my symptoms now much more deeply than I did when I was a kid, but that doesn't make them go away. And I can do things to make my symptoms not look present, but that doesn't make them less there.
Yes, so that is exactly it, and I think so. I think it could be both in that there are things I legitimately look at now where I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I do that anymore, and to a level of like I don't feel like I'm suppressing it either. And the question then comes in of like, I'm curious what sort of potential coping mechanism that could be, or if it's really just truly a dormant trait that no longer exists, which I think is totally possible. I just think that, like you were saying, like...
Do you have an example?
Well, like, you could, if you want to grab the DSM, I can, like, look at one specifically, but the example of, like, when I was saying the strap over my chest for, like, satchels for purses and stuff, is, like, that seems like a coping mechanism.
Yeah, to me, that I would call that a coping mechanism. I wouldn't say that the trait is dormant, like the forgetting things is dormant. I would say that you have coping mechanisms to do that, right? Like you do the ADHD triple check before you leave my house. You always do.
Yes,
do I have my phone? Do I have my keys? Do I have all my things? Right? That's a coping mechanism. You don't forget your things because you are always trying to make sure that you know where they are. And that to me isn't showing that you like don't have that symptom of misplacement or forgetting. It's that you have put all these coping mechanisms in place to make sure that it doesn't negatively impact you. Yeah. And like that's something that I do too.
Yes.
Especially, so we had the same purse problem. When I was like younger, I would leave them everywhere. Shopping bags, everything. I do it a lot less. So yes, that symptom actually has decreased for sure. Like I haven't left a shopping bag in a dressing room in a really long time, in forever. But I also have made coping mechanisms for that too. Like I use my purses or bags as a piece of my outfit so that it is something that I remember because I am into fashion. And if I want my outfit to be complete, then my purse is part of that. And that is what I have done to help me with the remembering. I tried the satchel thing, but sensory-wise, I can't do that. Can't buy into that.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to look at one as an example right now of like maybe even like the often interrupts or intrudes on others. Like it used to be as when I was a kid, very often for me to just like I would literally just interrupt until people would literally be like, Allie, like you're interrupting like way too much.
Yeah.
And then I obviously had like a shame about that when I was a kid, and I worked throughout that with my 20s of like not feeling shame about it. But I do feel like over time that that's not something that I do feel like it's not like at the throat, you know? So it's like that, I'm curious what would be that coping mechanism. And that's something that I obviously have to like do my own introspection on of like what could potentially be that coping mechanism, or is it just something that truly has been dormant? I know that,
or is it a response to trauma?
Right. So it could be a bunch of different things.
Because if you get told enough that people don't want to hear your thoughts, then you're going to start suppressing your thoughts.
Right. And which was a reality for me. The third psychiatrist I talked to, which was the most recent, had mentioned, he said that most of the time stimulants can potentially be this controversial topic with dealing with ADHD in adults, because there is this conception in the medical field that it eventually goes away, or it like
which is
gets better. And I think that I think that there's so much overlap going on with people in comorbidities and how we are individually raised, that's way too general of a call to make when making like a diagnosis or prescribing medication like that. So for the medical field to have such a blanket assumption about ADHD just going away as you get older, or not necessarily going away, but as he described it, like you develop natural coping mechanisms to the point where you don't need medication. And I do think that that is maybe somewhat the case for some people, but it's not everybody. And so the stigma around stimulants for adults definitely has to be re-reviewed of like, how are we making these judgment calls? That's a different rabbit hole, but like that was kind of the last conversation I had on it. So I think that there is more discussion to be had around remission, and more discussion to be had around what is the root of that remission, and how are people achieving that, and is there some sort of actual sense of peace of mind? Because like other than that, what's the point of the remission unless you as the person experiencing ADHD are like feeling that sense of like relief and peace over it? And why is that, and how is that, and how can we put more research into what this remission process is?
Which is interesting, because for me, I don't think that I think that a lot of the difficulty with ADHD is more related to the shame. And,
I agree.
Like, yes, the memory and, like, organizing things can be frustrating. But for me, I'm not upset by a lot of my symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I just think that, yes, the world was created not for people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Because yes, I fidget. Yes, I move around. I have gotten up and down in this spot 27 times. Why is that a problem?
Right.
Why is that a problem? That I fidget, that I move.
And I think it's because to neurotypical people, it's unsettling to them. And they perceive it in their brain as like a uncomfortability of something.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, they would stand up if they're uncomfortable, or that they are about to go do something. And it's like, no,
I just fidget. Yeah. Plus, I'm also chronically ill, so when I do it, it's also I have lower back pain and I have pain everywhere, so I am fidgeting. I'm moving and changing my body position all the time because of chronic pain. So, like that kind of thing. But at the same time, when we have conversations, we sometimes will interrupt each other or talk over each other, but not in like a disrespectful way. I'm not cutting you off from your conversation. I want to add to your conversation in a way that's productive and show you that I am paying attention and that I care and that I want to build on this, because what the hell is the point of talking to somebody if we're not there to build on our own thoughts and concepts?
Yeah, and I think that a big source of my pain as somebody who has experienced that is that is where most of the criticism in my life has come from neurotypical people, is when they would share an experience and I would try to relate to them with my experience because it was me showing that I was listening and that I cared, and they would be like, well, it's not about you.
Yeah. And Mark used to be like, oh, you always have to one-up us. And I'm like, I'm not trying to one-up you. I'm just trying to join the conversation. And that's just how we do it. And it's interesting because, like, as I know and I learn more and more about myself, that's how we relate to people. And honestly, personally, that makes way more sense to me, clearly, because that's the way my brain works. But it's like the same thing as like adapting for communication. Like, I have to adapt my communication for like pain levels, for my chronic illness. I always talk in analogies so that other people can understand them. And like, they don't understand like why I do that. They're like, give me a number. And I'm like, no, I can't do that, because that does not relay to you what is actually happening to me. Right. Because my number does not equal anybody else's number, and this is stupid. If you want to know how I feel, I need to explain it to you in something that you can relate to, because you can't relate to my pain. I have chronic illness. Do you? No, you cannot relate to my pain. That's why the other day we were on the beach, and Allie asked me if I had ever been stung by a jellyfish. I said yes. I said it feels like getting a tattoo. And that makes sense as an explanation, because I know what feeling like getting a tattoo feels like to my body. Right? And if that's what it feels like, then that same sensation is what it's going to feel like to Allie, but for her body when she got a tattoo, because we both have tattoos. So I can use that as something that she can relate to. Oh, shit. So when I got a tattoo, it felt like this. That's what it's going to feel like if I get stung by a jellyfish. Because for me, getting a tattoo isn't bad. I don't mind it. It doesn't feel great. Yes, you're being stabbed, but like, it's not that bad to me. But for Allie, it feels different. So like, that kind of thing, that it makes more sense to me. Yeah, it does. And I think, like, on a deeper level, if we communicate like that, that just makes more sense, I think, logically. But that's not how the world is made. And so, like, even though we're relating to each other, when we talk to each other, if we talk to a neurotypical person, they get insulted, because I think mostly because they're not healed from their insecurities. They think that we're comparing ourselves to each other. And that's the problem. We're not comparing ourselves to each other. We are learning from each other. And a lot of times I think that other people are just get so insecure about it because they think that we're comparing ourselves.
Yeah, and I want to expand on that, because I do think that, and this might be like philosophical, is that I do think that does work as a generalized statement for neurotypical people, only because, and we see this in different ways in the world, whether it's dealing with a marginalized community or you're dealing with gender or things like that, is that there are certain groups that have been forced to evolve in different ways than others due to the hardships that we've experienced through societal oppression or the ways that we have just had to adapt to the world. So when you're looking at people who are neurodivergent and they are coping and trying to adapt to the world, and that is so much more of a focal point in their lives to continuously try to blend in or accommodate or something, you look at neurotypical people and realize that is not a struggle that they have. So therefore, they are not at the level of reflection that we are. And I think that is arguable. So I think that that's like something very fair to call out, not saying that like all neurotypical people, of course, are like all insecure, but
all neurodivergent people are actually self-reflective either.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and that this topic could be extended upon into like queer culture and like whatever. But it's like, but I do think that there is like social like a social epistemological truth in that of there is a collective of people that like have experiences, and you could probably extract data and aggregate that and kind of see it on a chart if that like is easier to digest. But like I do think that neurotypical people do not have to accommodate at such an extreme level as we do, and therefore there is a lot less compassion and understanding for what we go through. And I even see this with neurodivergent people who are like neurotypically washed, in that they are still so much in that mindset.
I like that's right.
That it's like they're abandoning their own people. You know what I mean? You're even getting and so that it can kind of go a bunch of different ways like that. But I'm glad that you said that, because I think that is like super important for people to know. Is like we are doing work that you don't see, and that creates a different muscle that you don't have. Yeah. If I'm speaking to somebody who's neurotypical.
Yeah, for sure. Right, it's the same thing.
Period.
Yeah. Period. Okay, so last little aspect, let's do our superpower versus disability.
Okay, yes.
So, of course, we always want to talk about mental health, these different things like that. It can be a superpower as much as it is a disability. So, for the first part of work, right, in work, ADHD, superpower, I can do what it takes other people 4 days to do in 4 hours. And I'm not, this isn't like a brag. It's not like me trying to say, like, think I'm hot shit. Like, I'm not. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And, like, I produce so much more work, which in turn, like, ends up people thinking that, like, you're not doing that much work, or like that you can handle so much more work, and then you end up doing a billion jobs at once. But like, that's a problem in itself. But like, my ability to process, understand a task, and then get it done is so much faster than other people.
Love that. Should I relate to that, or you want to jump into the disability portion?
I'll do the disability real quick, and then
you
can do yours.
Cool. I was seeing how your brain is working at the moment.
Either or for me. Honestly, girl, I don't care if you jumped in right there.
We're all accommodating over here. Okay.
Okay. The disability part, I would definitely say, is the scheduling, the time blindness. I am extremely time blind. I do have like accommodations for myself that I do. I set so many alarms and like reminders and stuff like that. But the time blindness can be really hard, especially in a career position like teaching, where you are supposed to have like a 30-minute whole group lesson and then 20-minute sections for these things, and it's like it can get away from you. So you really have to like stay aware. I set myself timers for everything.
Yeah.
And so like, I have coping mechanisms, so it all turns out fine. But it's definitely that time blindness is like one of the biggest, hardest parts.
Yeah, and so her superpower, I think, is also my superpower of like I can get something done like so quickly to a level to where I'm like, this does feel like a superpower. And I think that, and now I'm in a creative role where I am not judged by how long I take. I am judged by the quality of work that I submit. And there are creative roles in marketing. If you're looking at this and you're like, I can do that, look at anything that has to do with graphic design or copywriting. Like, it is honestly like game changing for if you are neurodivergent and like have that ability.
Yeah.
But
or leadership
or any role that judges you by the quality of your work and not the time that you spend doing it. Because I think both of us can agree we logically cannot make any sense of why the amount of time that we spend doing something has anything to do with it, because of the fact that we don't operate on like a timer. We operate in flow. Nor
do we do linear. So my brain is not linear. A lot of people have to
mine
go
isn't either.
this. No. I might be doing this, and then I'm going to do 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 this.
Yeah.
And other people would be like, oh, no, you have to finish and do one thing at a time. And it's like, first off, don't tell me how I need to do something when I'm doing something 4 times faster, 10 times faster than you are. So, like, whatever. But, like, that's just the way our brain works. I need to take a break on something, and I need to go do something else. Yeah. And, like, that is just the way our brains work.
Yeah, and even down to an example of like writing an ad, for example. You've got the hook, you've got the body of the message itself, and then you've got the call to action of what's going to happen. Now, a neurotypical person might say, we start with the body, we add the hook, and then we add the CTA, or whatever. Who knows what whoever thinks is right is right. They might go with like a structure like that.
Yeah.
But a creative copywriter is going to, that is
my brain
neurodivergent.
Says, oh, I came up with a call to action. Ooh,
Exactly.
I came up with a hook.
You get inspired
okay.
by something in your brain that you then follow that trail. So you're not, you can't force that creativity. And I think even people who are not neurodivergent that have that creative brain may like have overlap with that, because I think that that's very true. And I think that that's just what works so well with creative roles and neurodivergent people, is that we all can kind of come to the same agreement that like, yeah, it's much more inspiration based, and how do you feed that inspiration every day so that you can continue to like create cool stuff or whatever. But anyway, and then speaking to the disability portion is, I personally don't have time blindness because I have so much anxiety. So it's repressed to the point where like I'm obsessively thinking about time. I'm always thinking about, I've probably looked at, which I can't even see that far, looked at how long we've done this.
I've thought about it 27 times. I've thought about it every second.
How long have we done it? We're only in an hour. It's okay.
Oh, okay. I've thought about it every second for the past like 20 minutes. So
right. Okay.
We're both obsessing over that.
So there is like a time obsession of like then thinking about like, oh my God, how long is it? Or are people going to not listen?
But that's because we have time blindness.
Yes. You're like,
so
but sweetie, it's because you're coping.
Yeah. So that's the same thing. Like we have severe anxiety around time. So a lot of people with ADHD will either have a really hard time with time, like Maria, who's always late, right? Because she doesn't have a good handle on time, or will always be obsessed with time. So myself, I am always 15 minutes early to everything.
Right.
Hair appointment. Doctor's appointment, we got like 30 minutes early. Everything.
Yeah.
We're going to meet for coffee, I would be there 15 minutes early.
Right.
And just obsessed with it. And like, because we're so time blind, we'll be like, oh, we get stuck in like limbos and stuff too. So it's like, Allie was coming here at like noonish. Your girl at 11 o'clock was like, well, Allie will be here soon.
Yeah.
There's an hour.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can be done in an hour. But my brain said, well, I want to be ready. I don't want to be like doing my laundry when she gets here. And so like I don't have time to like fold the laundry and then put it away. I don't have time to do this, da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I put a 15-minute cushion on everything. So
yes, me too.
Need that 15-minute cushion of getting there. And then I need 15-minute cushion before I get ready. And then I need a 15-minute cushion from like whatever I'm doing. I am always like planning an hour ahead of everything.
And I think that people who we end up becoming like, because of our time blindness, we become actually in certain people like really good at managing time.
Yeah.
Because of that, because it's an obsession. Yeah. And like, you know, I like, even though, like, I knew right before I left the house, I'm like, I'm probably going to be about 20 minutes late, like, to your house, because I knew how the day was unfolding. And sometimes you just can't help it, like, but I'll know down to, like, the minute of when I'm going to be somewhere.
Yes, exactly.
Like, so it's not that I'm early or late.
That's why we're going to, like, the beach. I'm like, Allie, I'll be there, ETA, 12:09. We were supposed to be together at 12.
Yeah, I know.
I'll be there at 12:09. I'm, like, panicking.
It's the same.
It's like, we're going to the fucking beach with no, like, actual commitment. I was like, I am late for the time commitment that I made for myself.
Because it's the shame. It's like beating yourself up over it. So
relationships, superpower. We can read people.
Yes,
because, is that the autism or the ADHD?
We're gonna have a separate game. Is it the autism or the ADHD?
That would be funny. That would be a funny episode.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Relationships, superpowers, ADHD. You know what? I cannot hold a grudge. I cannot hold a grudge because I cannot hold on to emotions like that.
Okay.
I cannot hold a grudge. I cannot do it. Like, if I'm mad at you, like, it just drains out of me.
That's interesting.
I think it's because out of sight, out of mind. the problem's no longer presenting itself, my brain forgets about it.
Interesting.
So like my brain just forgets about things. And I think that's I think that's my ADHD. I think it really is.
Wow. And for disability?
Again, it's hard because it's like the ADHD autism thing. So like
the ADHD.
Communication can be really hard for me. I know. I would say definitely time blindness. No. You know what it is? It's that oral processing, that auditory processing. Mark gets really mad at me because he thinks I'm not paying attention to him because he'll be talking to me and then I think he's done talking and so I go back to doing what I was doing and he was like, I was just talking to you, like, why are you back on your phone? And I'm like, I thought the conversation was done. Or he'll say something and then I don't hear him and then he gets mad at me and I'm like, I'm not ignoring you. I didn't hear you. I cannot tell. Like, I don't choose what my brain processes. I'm not, like, trying to ignore you and trying to not process things. Like, if my earballs did not do what the fuck my earballs are supposed to do and I didn't hear the shit, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. And that's a struggle.
We went off there.
No, I think that's accurate, though. Superpower for relationship, I feel like
Mark needs to answer that question for me. Sorry.
I feel like
go back into what is the criteria.
My relationship has definitely seen benefits of my ADHD in that I feel like I am able to hold space and compassion because of the fact that I can compartmentalize my emotions.
You know what?
And I don't necessarily know if that's a healthy thing. So I'm not calling out that just because it's a superpower, I guess, isn't necessarily correlating it to being a healthy thing, and people could argue that, right? But I do think that can come in handy sometimes, especially if the person that you are with is also neurodivergent or what have you. But like in moments that I think are hard and everybody's coming to the table with like a certain percentage that they have for the day, I can put my emotions to the side in order to create space, but I have to remember to process those. Like I have to bring it back and process them because my emotional processing is like unique in that way. But I know that it's important to process my emotions so that my body can feel it. But you're not always going to be in a situation where your emotions can just be processed right then and there. And maybe people have professional opinions on that, and I definitely want to read more about that. But like, as it stands right now, and as I've relationally in all kinds of relationships in my life, I have been able to be a really good person in crisis, a really good person.
Oh, that's a good one.
In emergencies, because I have this ability to turn it off and get done what needs to get done.
I think that can also be the anxiety disorder because we are always in that.
There is a sense of always being in fight or flight, and it's like there is there are little things that will debilitate me, but when it comes to emergencies, I'm good.
Oh wait, what? Damn it, my brain just blanked. Whenever you watch a movie, you know when there's like a scene where there's like something really bad happening and everybody just goes like pauses for a second. They're like,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. That's what we don't have. If something's happening, if there's like a friggin' like somebody's attacking us, like I'm not gonna pause and be like, oh my god. Yeah. No, I'm gonna go right into it because like I don't need that pause to like panic. Yeah. Because I'm already. It's like the Hulk, you know.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
Yeah.
How do you not get angry? I'm always angry. Well, how do you not panic? Bitch, I'm always panicking.
You're like, I'm always worried. The disability of that is easily the rejection-sensitive dysphoria for me.
Yeah.
I struggle with rejection in any form, and if not highly conscious and me working on these things and practicing these in my relationships, can absolutely debilitate me to a point where I no longer am communicating effectively because I am afraid of rejection, or I am,
to me too.
or I am just internally debilitated and struggling, which maybe certain people close to me can see, but people on the outside of that don't really know what's going on. So at a career level or at, something where people don't have that intimate access to me, they won't know that I'm struggling, and they will think that certain ways that they are interacting with me is all good, when in fact it is not all good. When in fact I am not okay.
I am not well.
Yeah, so that's I think the thing I struggle the most with for relationships.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of struggles in relationships, I think, with ADHD.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of patience with your partner. And your partner needs to have empathy and understand that your brain works in a different way, and that what you're doing is not to insult them, right? Like, because of the interrupting, because of, like, the issues with attention, like, all that stuff. It's like, it can be hard, I assume, for a partner, because if they are insecure in any way, they will see that as you not caring about them, or you're not paying attention to them. And it's like, you have to understand that that's not something I'm actively seeking to do. It's like, my brain just really doesn't work like that. And people will be like, oh, well, you're paying attention to that. Why can you pay attention to that? You can't pay attention to me. And it's like, I'm not truly, like, my brain is just so all over the place. It's hard.
And I think that's interesting. And what I'll say too, so we can definitely make this a 2-part. We could cut this video in half and make it part ADHD, part 1, part 2, and submit these separately if you want.
What do you mean?
Like this video, since it's like an hour and plus long, and I can edit this part out, or
so
we'll leave it in for you. Is like, because of the length, we can actually
let's cut it to the
part 1, part 2, and now we have 2 pieces of content.
DSM-5, like TikTok, that part, and then we could probably cut it like a little bit
into like this ADHD discussion versus like ADHD game diagnosis or something.
Yeah,
interesting. But anyway, I interjected with that, and I don't remember where I was going.
Okay, last one, personal. So superpower, personal. I think there's a lot of superpowers for this personally. And I think maybe that has to do with the fact that I have done a lot of work and a lot of healing, and that I have come to the point where I truly love who I am.
I love that. Aww. Yeah, I know, I'm like getting emotional. I'm like, aww. Hello.
Oh, Mommy's trying to I'll call you back in a little bit, Mommy.
Love you, Mom.
Love you. So, where was I? Oh, superpowers. So, I think that one I love are injustice sensitivity. Like, that is one of that's one of the things that they say is really big as a mental health symptom. ADHD, we have injustice sensitivity. They have the audacity to say that like it's a bad thing. I'm sorry, bitch. Thank you. I love my injustice sensitivity. I am not going to let anybody be disrespectful. I am not going to let anybody hurt somebody else for something that they cannot control. I am aggressively advocate for human rights. I am always willing to inject, no matter how much anxiety it gives me, to give my 2 cents when somebody is being cruel or unkind. I do not let people walk all over me. I do not allow people to disrespect me. And like as a child, that used to get me in trouble because I do not just automatically show respect to authority that is disrespecting me. A lot of authority figures think that no matter how they treat a child, that they deserve respect just because of who they are. Yeah. And I do not subscribe to that. I show you respect. I always show everyone a base level of respect. But if they disrespect me, I'm not going to continue to show them this people-pleasing level of respect while they're disrespecting me. I'm going to call them out on their bullshit. So that, calling people out on their bullshit, again, understanding concepts like in a very deep level, empathy for others and for myself too, comprehending and understanding the world and human development and all of these things, breaking down all of that. I think those are all like just superpowers from my ADHD, just my experience and my perspective in the world, of not allowing myself to, or giving myself the grace of not following the status quo.
Yeah.
I don't feel the urge to follow some status quo, some invisible rule that says that I need to do things in a certain way, and I think that gives me a lot of fucking freedom.
Yeah.
So,
that's
injustice sensitivity, and
that's a clip. Somebody said that on TikTok and said they like pretended to make a trend, and they're like, "Oh, that's clipped or something," and like, no, I'm just like, "That's a clip." Anyway.
Oh yeah, that
Did
guy.
you see that? Oh my god.
The guy said that he was trying to. No, you sent it to me, but I had already. I think I might have sent it to you, and you might have sent it to me.
Classic ADHD. I'm like, who sent it to who? We don't know.
Mark does that to me all the time. He's like, did you see this? And I was like, Mark, I sent that to you.
Oh my god. But yeah, so I feel like I'm going to say that in our talks now. Just like
personal disability.
Yeah.
Maybe the same thing as the thing that I said was a superpower for relationships. I don't hold grudges, right? This should have been a disability of relationships too, though, because I was thinking of relationships as in just me and my partner, but that's not what a relationship is. So I'm going to add this to my other disability for relationships, is that I have a really hard time creating attachments with people because of my object constants. So I know there's object permanence, right? When something's gone, I know it still exists. I'm not that's not my problem. My problem is object constants. When I don't see it, I do not remember that it exists. I don't think about it. So it happens with people when I leave. So if I have friends in college and I moved away, I do not talk to them ever again.
Yeah.
That happens to me a lot.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. You're sharing a vulnerability and you're I don't talk to them ever again.
It's hilarious. It's just my brain just
yeah.
And then it just, unless I see something that triggers a memory. And then I'm like, I miss this person.
Yeah.
Right? There's only a few people that my brain has developed that, connection with, and it's not many. It's 5.
Yeah, I would say if that for me.
Yeah.
And people that I deeply care about, people that I love and admire and have no ill will towards, and I literally, anytime I think about them, my heart swells, and I'm like, I hope they're literally living their best life, and I love them so much, and this, that, and it's literally haven't talked to them in 8 months. It's
Shay and I, and Allie will understand this, because she knows that Shay, my best friend and I, we have been together since first grade.
Yeah.
This human, she's my platonic soulmate. She is one of my humans, so is Shay. But Shay is family. She comes to Christmas Eve every year with my family. She calls my mom, Mom. I call her Mom. It's just, she's my family. In college, we once went 2 years without really talking to each other than being hey, on our birthdays. Because college is so much. There's so much going on. And we weren't in the same vicinity. We were really far away from each other. We didn't see each other for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And it, but with us, that doesn't mean that we no longer are friends, and we understand that.
Right.
So, our connection was so deep that I didn't feel that meant that we weren't going to be friends anymore. I could just be Shay, and then we would talk every single day for the next month. Yeah. But then we would forget that each other existed for 2 months.
Yeah.
Because there was so much going on, and the time blindness.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it had been 2 months, but it had been 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? That happens, and so that's really hard.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that disability 1,000% of I feel I am not great at nurturing connections that are not near me unless I put a lot of active effort. And that's not to say that if you have ADHD or any of the things that we experience, it's not to say that it's impossible. There is, with certain efforts, there is accommodations and things. It's just what is hard for, I feel people with ADHD, is that we are still learning how to gather those resources and figure out what are the things that can help and what sort of support systems, whether it's people, medication, whatever,
I think
that we
one
can use
thing
to
that is
make it easier.
Makes it even harder for me too is I get sensory overloads. So sound for me is not great. I do not want to hear people's voices a lot of times, especially when we're recordings. So like, Mark will listen to his phone on like TikTok or whatever on like loud, and it literally like makes my ears want to bleed. Like I just want to like shove a screwdriver in my ear.
Yeah.
And so like being far away and our only communication being like over the phone is the only way that you can really feel connected, unless like you're okay with just texting. And like a lot of people feel like that's not enough. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
And like I don't feel a problem with that. But like for me that makes it even harder because I can't even connect to you like that because I don't want to hear your voice. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, a lot of times I don't. Like I don't answer the phone for a lot of people.
Yeah. And totally understandable. Like we all have like our different things that just like viscerally hurt at like a skin level where you're like, I physically want to rip my skin off. And
again, not sure if that's the ADHD or the autism.
Yeah, so find out on the next episode. But and then the last thing is the superpower on my end is just generally in personal development. Like I feel like I have been able to skyrocket my learnings and growth, and because of the way that I am so hyper aware of things and have so largely had to dedicate my growth. Oh no, keep going. I think it almost felt inspirational to me. It felt like there was like some sort of like anyway.
You mean our go-to theme song?
Oh my god. We will forget. But yeah, so that's my superpower is just the way that I can keep growing and grow at a rapid pace, and I feel like
you can, babe.
And I just feel so grateful for it.
Together.
Whether it's a superpower or disability, I'm grateful for it nonetheless. It makes me who I am, makes you who you are.
Yeah. And we're great.
And we are great with our ADHD and all. I feel like this is a kick-ass episode.
It really was.
It's definitely going to be a two-parter. Yeah. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. I'm Allie.
I'm Nicole.
And this is
Acknowledge Knowledge.
Woo-hoo.
Beep, beep, beep. Soon we'll have an intro, outro.
Oh, hell yeah.
One day.
Meow.
Meow.
Leave studio. In session for all? Sure.